Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a bit of a detour. We're moving away from the kind of historical timelines and narratives we often explore in Western tradition, and we're plunging into something, well, much denser, more abstract, definitely more architectural.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Architectural.
We are diving deep into the Sefer Yetzirah. It's known as the Book of Formation.
And it's this remarkable text because, honestly, it's tiny. The core version, the shortest one, maybe 2,000 words, tops.
2,000 words, that's it.
That's it. And yet, it's arguably the absolute foundation for, well, all the Jewish Kabbalah that came later. And actually, you can trace its influence through a lot of Western esoteric thought.
So a small book, huge impact. But if you actually pick it up, what do you find? It's not like opening Genesis, right? No stories.
Not at all. No history, no laws like you'd find in, say, Leviticus. What you find feels much more like a technical manual, or maybe a set of really cryptic instructions, like how the universe was put together.
Okay, and that's the real challenge, isn't it? Our sources, they often say this book is, and I'm quoting here, intentionally designed to conceal as much as it reveals.
Exactly. It speaks in these formulas, these really abrupt statements, kind of like maxims. And symbols, lots of symbols.
So our mission today, it feels really crucial. We need to unpack this thing, this complex, cryptic doctrine of the Sefer Yetzirah, like from the ground up.
Yeah, piece by piece.
We're going to try and map out its unique structure, this whole cosmology built on language and number, not history. And the goal really is to present the whole story, lay out all the information so you can actually process this incredibly dense, powerful stream of ideas. Make sense of it.
And the sheer audacity of it. I mean, this little book, its ultimate claim is basically that the universe isn't just described by language, but that the universe is a text. And this book, it's the grammar manual for that text.
Okay. The grammar of reality.
Pretty much. It offers this path to understanding God, but not through, miracles or historical events. Instead, it's through understanding the mechanics, the structure of God's own thought process. Right at the moment of creation. It's like the secret science behind monotheism.
Okay, so before we even get into the cosmic mechanics, the actual how-to of creation, we have to look at the document itself. Because the mystery around its origins, who wrote it, when, that's actually central to understanding why it became so powerful.
Absolutely. The context is everything here.
So let's start with that riddle, authorship.
Right. So if you ask the tradition, especially, looking at medieval sources like Judah Halevi's The Kuzari, the answer you get is immediate. And it's a big one.
Who is it?
Abraham, the patriarch, Abraham himself.
Abraham, the first patriarch.
That's the claim. This profound wisdom, this understanding of creation's mechanics, is positioned as belonging to the very first person who truly grasped monotheism.
Okay, that's a heck of an origin story, gives it immense weight. But modern scholarship doesn't really buy that, does it? From a historical perspective.
Not even close, historically speaking. I mean, the text simply wasn't written 4,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The language is the giveaway.
How so?
The Hebrew in the Sefer Yetzirah. It's a very specific kind. It's pure, very technical Mishnaic Hebrew, the kind used in the Mishnah around the 2nd, 3rd century CE.
Yeah.
What it doesn't have are the later Aramaic influences or the kind of liturgical, poetic language that you see in medieval Jewish writing, that linguistic fingerprint. It puts the actual composition firmly in late antiquity.
Late antiquity.
Wow.
So when are we talking, roughly?
The scholarly consensus, based on the language and concepts, places the core text somewhere between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE. So, millennia after Abraham.
Right, big difference. So if it wasn't Abraham, why? The insistence. Why does the tradition cling to that attribution? Our research suggests this isn't just like a historical mistake. It's doing something else.
It's making a profound theological claim. It's a strategic move, really.
How does that work?
By attributing the text to Abraham, the tradition does something crucial. It places this knowledge before the revelation at Sinai, before Moses received the Torah.
Okay. So it's positioning it as something different from the law.
Exactly. It's saying this isn't the Torah, the commandments given to Moses and the Israelites. This is something more fundamental. This is the primordial cosmology, the laws of formation. Or, using our modern language, it's like the source code of the universe.
The source code.
That Abraham figured out just by contemplating the order of the cosmos. Pure contemplation, not divine dictation in the same way as Sinai.
So that act of attributing it to Abraham Pseudepigraphy, that's the term.
Yes, pseudepigraphy, writing under a false ancient name.
It basically acts as a kind of canonization. It lifts the Sefer Yetzirah way up, makes it seem like revealed wisdom, not just human commentary like the Talmud.
Precisely. It gives it ultimate authority over the nature of reality itself. It bypasses the whole rabbinic debate structure. It just is.
It cements its status. Abraham, the guy who walked away from polytheism. The Ivri, the one who crossed over. He becomes the original knower. The one who got the blueprint.
He's the source.
Yeah.
Which makes the knowledge itself seem foundational.
Okay, but nailing down that actual historical time frame, the 3rd to 6th century CE, that's also really important because it puts the text right in the middle of what you called the crucible of late antiquity. What was going on then? What kind of world produced this?
Oh, it was an absolute melting pot, a real intellectual ferment. You've got the Roman Empire transforming, Christianity is rising and trying to define itself, and philosophical ideas are just zipping back and forth across the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
You have Neoplatonism really hitting its stride, thinkers like Plotinus, later Iamblichus, mapping out these complex systems of divine emanations flowing from the one.
Right, the whole idea of levels of reality cascading down.
Exactly. And you still have remnants of sophisticated Gnostic systems around, too.
Yeah.
You know, with their own elaborate stories about creation, light, darkness, flawed creator gods.
A lot of competition in the cosmology department.
Definitely. And within Judaism itself, this is also the period when you see the rise of the Hekkelot literature, the palace mysticism.
Right, the texts about mystics ascending through heavenly palaces to get a vision of God's throne.
Yes. So the Sefer Yetzirah emerges alongside all of this. It's like a parallel stream, but with a very different focus. While mainstream rabbinic Judaism was deeply invested in the Mishnah and Talmud, law, history, community regulation.
Halakha.
Halakha, exactly. The Sefer Yetzirah circle, whoever they were off on this other track, a kind of scientific mystical cosmology.
Scientific mystical. How so?
They weren't focused on dietary laws or how to observe Shabbat. They were obsessed with mechanics, structure, language. How did God actually build the universe? What are the fundamental components? It reads like physics almost, but mystical physics.
So it was a kind of Jewish answer to the Greek and Gnostic systems, a way to explain how the one abstract infinite God could possibly create this messy physical world we live in.
That's exactly it. It's tackling that core problem of monotheism, the gap between the transcendent one and the diverse many. And its answer, as we'll see, it all comes down to number and language.
Now, when we talk about the Sefer Yetzirah, it's really important for you, the listener, to understand this isn't like one single book you can just go pick up off a shelf and it's always the same.
Right. That's a key point.
Our sources often call it a textual constellation. It exists in these different versions, sometimes really different versions, called recensions. And that variation isn't just sloppy copying. It tells us something about how people use this text.
That idea of it being a living, evolving document is spot on. We generally track 3 main versions, and looking at them helps understand the text's journey.
Okay, let's write those down. Where should we start? The oldest.
Yeah, let's start with what's likely closest to the original, the short recension.
And short means?
Seriously short. Like I said, maybe 2,000 words total, sometimes just 6 chapters. It's incredibly dense, cryptic, almost like reading oracle pronouncements or...
Mantic, like prophecy.
Mantic, yeah. And apodictic. That's a term you used earlier. It just lays things down as fact.
Okay, can you unpack apodictic a bit more? What does that feel like when you read it?
It means it doesn't argue. It doesn't try to persuade you with logic or evidence. It just states these fundamental truths, boom, like 10 Sephirot Bilima, 22 foundation letters. End of statement.
No explanation needed.
None given. It's presented as an axiom, an eternal truth you just have to accept. And then you have to figure out what it means, what the implications are. The brevity itself forces you to interpret, to meditate on it.
Which kind of leads naturally to the next version, right? The long recension. This shows people were definitely trying to figure it out.
Exactly. The long recension is, well, longer. It's significantly expanded. It includes lots of additions, explanations, sometimes quite detailed commentaries that seem to have been absorbed right into the main text.
So like marginal notes that got copied in over time?
That's the most likely scenario. Imagine teachers using the supercryptic short recension with their students. The students are confused, asking questions. The teacher explains, adds clarifications in the margins. And then later, someone copying the manuscript thinks, oh, this explanation is helpful, and just incorporates it into the main body of the text.
So it proves this wasn't just some sacred object locked away in a vault. It was a working text, A teaching tool for communities of mystics actively wrestling with its meaning.
Absolutely. It was alive. Which brings us to the third key version, the Saadian recension. And this one represents a very different kind of engagement with the text, more like a philosophical cleanup operation.
A taming, you called it earlier.
Yeah, a taming. Moving it from the, let's say, mystical study circle into the more rationalist academy.
And this is the version associated with Saadia Aghan, the big 10th century rationalist philosopher. He was trying to make Judaism compatible with Greek philosophy, right? Aristotle, Kalam.
That was his whole project. And he definitely curated the Sefer Yetzirah to fit that project. He selected which verses to include, sometimes changed their order. Basically, he arranged it to make it seem more logical, more structured, less weird.
Less magical.
Definitely less magical. His commentary systematically filters the text, playing down the ecstatic or practical elements and reframing it as a kind of proto-scientific treatise about the physics of creation and language, making it respectable for philosophers.
Okay, so these different versions really show the text being pulled in different directions. It was clearly a performative document, as our sources say. People didn't just read it. They engaged with it, argued about it, added to it, tried to fit it into their own systems.
And that unique style, the abruptness, the repetition of key phrases like mantras, the deep symbolism that's all part of its function, the extreme difficulty, the crypsis, it's not a flaw, it's a feature.
A feature? How so?
It's designed to make you work. It forces you, the reader, to stop, to ponder, to meditate, to actively fill in the gaps, as you said. The text gives you the bare bones, the architecture.
Yeah.
But you have to build the meaning yourself.
So the very act of struggling with the text, trying to probe its meaning, trying to permute the possibilities, transpose the ideas, that actually mirrors what the text says God did when it describes God probing and permuting the letters to create the universe.
You got it. The process of reading is designed to be a mystical exercise. It's a reenactment. By struggling to understand the text formation, you participate, in a small way, in the original cosmic formation. It's not just about absorbing information. The text is supposed to form you.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We've looked at the text itself, its history, its style. Now let's dive into the actual doctrine, the cosmic blueprint.
Yeah.
What is the structure of reality according to the Sefer Yetzirah?
Right. At its core, it proposes this incredibly ambitious theory of everything. But it's not based on physics as we know it. It's linguistic mathematical.
And it's all summarized right at the beginning, isn't it? That famous opening line.
That's the key. By 32 wondrous paths of wisdom, Yah, the Lord of hosts, engraved and created his world. 32 paths. That's the magic number.
32 paths. That number encapsulates everything.
Everything. And the text breaks it down immediately. It gives you the formula. 32 equals 10 plus 22.
Okay, 10 plus 22. What are the 10 and what are the 22?
The 10 are the 10 Sephirot Belima. These represent number, structure, the abstract principles or dimensions. And the 22 are the 22 foundation letters, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. They represent language, articulation, the actual building blocks.
So number and language, structure and substance almost.
That's a good way to think about it. The Sephiros are the scaffolding, the letters are the bricks. And the text claims that everything physical things, abstract concepts, time, space, consciousness, it's all just different combinations and arrangements of these 32 fundamental components. Reality isn't built on atoms in this view. It's built on numerals and phonemes.
Wow, that's a radically different way of seeing the world. And you can immediately see the connection to the intellectual world of late antiquity, right? This wasn't created in a vacuum.
Not at all. The author, or authors, were clearly aware of and responding to Greek philosophical models. They were Judaizing them.
How so? Where do you see the parallels?
Well, the concept of emanation, for instance. The Sephirot flow out, one after the other, from this ultimate single source, the spirit of the living God. That structure, that hierarchical unfolding, it clearly echoes Neoplatonic ideas.
Like Plotinus's hypostases. The one, then nous, intellect, then psyche, world, soul, that kind of downward cascade.
Exactly. The Sefer Yetzirah takes that basic philosophical engine emanation from a transcendent source and gives it a thoroughly Jewish framework. It's creation through emanation, using these specific numerical and linguistic principles.
And the focus on number, the 10, Sephirat. That feels very Pythagorean.
Absolutely. Pythagoreanism, with its belief that number and geometry are the ultimate reality, the key to the cosmos, that resonates strongly here. The Sefer Yetzirah establishes the decade, the number 10, as this perfect numerical foundation. And the very actions of creation, it describes God weighing, counting, permuting. These are mathematical operations.
So it's presenting this kind of intellectualized, almost mathematical path to God,
Yeah.
which, as our sources point out, is striking for what it leaves out.
It really is. This is a cosmic Judaism, as some scholars call it. The proofs it offers are linguistic, mathematical, structural. They aren't historical or narrative.
Meaning
You won't find the Exodus story here. No Moses receiving the tablets on Mount Sinai, no detailed discussion of Jewish law, the halakha. All the core narratives of rabbinic Judaism are conspicuously absent.
Why? What's the alternative path it's offering?
It's offering a way to understand God, not through his interventions in human history or through obedience to specific commandments revealed in time, but through comprehending the very structure of his thought, the underlying logic of creation itself. And that logic, it claims, is perfectly captured in these 32 paths of wisdom. It's a different route to the divine.
Okay, let's really zoom in on those first 10 paths. The Sephiro. This is absolutely critical because if you, the listener, have heard anything about Kabbalah, you've probably heard about the Sephiro.
But the Sephiro in this text, the Sefer Yetzirah, are radically fundamentally different from the famous Sephiro of later Kabbalah, like the Tree of Life.
This is maybe the single biggest point of confusion, right?
It absolutely is. And understanding this distinction is non-negotiable if you want to grasp this text on its own terms. The key lies in that unique, strange qualifier the text uses, belima.
Belima. You mentioned it's a compound word.
Yes, beli, meaning without, and ma, which can mean what or substance or even closure. So usually translated as without substance or sometimes ineffable, limitless, abstract.
Without substance, what is that doing theologically? Why add that weird word?
It's genius, actually. Think about the context again. Late antiquity. You've got Gnostic systems talking about emanations from God eons, archons that are often personified, named, sometimes even flawed or rebellious. They have substance, personality.
Okay.
The Sefer Yetzirah needed to present a system of emanations without falling into that same trap, without compromising radical monotheism. It couldn't have these emanations looking like lesser gods.
Ah, I see. So Belima is like a disclaimer.
Exactly. It's a theological firewall, a conceptual sterilization unit. By calling the Sefer Belima without substance, the text is shouting, these are not entities. These are not personalities. They are not divine beings you can worship.
So what are they then?
They are principles. Abstract, numerical, spatial principles. They are the tools the Creator used, the fundamental categories or dimensions of existence, not beings in themselves.
The pure abstract scaffolding. Got it. Okay, so what are these 10 specific Sephirot in the Sefer Yetzirah? How do they unfold?
The text describes a linear sequence, an emanation starting from the ultimate source.
The spirit, Ruach of the living God. This is the absolute origin, pure consciousness, vitality, the source of everything.
The prime mover, almost.
In a sense. Then number 2, air, Ave, which emanates from spirit. Air here is like the primordial substance, the breath, the medium through which creation begins.
Spirit gives rise to air, then.
Number 3, water, Maim, which emanates from air.
Okay.
And number 4, fire, Esh, which emanates from water.
Hold on. Spirit, air, water, fire. That order. It's not the standard elemental order you might expect, like from Greek philosophy. Fire usually comes earlier, or is paired differently.
You're right. It's not standard physics. It seems to emphasize a theological sequence, or maybe a sequence of increasing density or definition, from pure spirit to mediating air, then the fundamental liquid, water, and finally the energetic principle, fire. These first 4 establish the source and the 3 core states or elements needed for a world.
Interesting. So that's 4. What about the other 6? Where do they come from?
The remaining 6 Sephirot define the structure of space itself. They emanate conceptually from the first 4. They are the 6 infinite directions.
So just the directions.
Essentially, yes. They are the conceptual anchors that give the created world extension, dimension, boundaries. They seal the universe. So the whole system of 10 is source, 3 primordial element states, and 6 spatial dimensions. It's a map of the basic coordinates and materials of reality. Very abstract.
Okay, this brings us right back to that crucial distinction you emphasized earlier. Someone listening only remembers one thing about the Sephirot from this deep dive. What should it be?
It has to be this. The Sephirot in the Sefer Yetzirah are abstract, numerical, elemental, and spatial. Their key adjective is belima, without substance. Think of them as the blueprint, the scaffolding, the mathematical constants, very bare bones.
And how does that contrast sharply with what people usually think of as the Sephirot, the ones from the Zohar, the Tree of Life?
Those later Sephirot, They're a completely different universe, really. They are complex, dynamic, almost psychological forces. They have evocative names. Keter, crown. Chokmah, wisdom. Bina, understanding. Hesed, love. Gevurah, severity, judgment. Tiferet, beauty. Netzach, victory. Hod, splendor. Yesod, foundation. Malkut, kingdom.
Much more descriptive, personified almost.
Highly personified. In later Kabbalah, they become anthropomorphic, they have genders, they interact dramatically, they form the limbs or faces, partsufim, of Adam Kadmon, the primordial human. It's this rich, complex mythology.
And none of that is in the Sefer Yetzirah.
Absolutely none of it. No named Sephiro beyond the elements and directions, no tree of life diagram, no Adam Kadmon, no divine drama. Reading that later elaborate anthropomorphic system back into this terse, abstract, late antique text, it's the single most common mistake. It's like trying to understand Newtonian physics by reading quantum field theory first. You have to start here with the original abstract blueprint.
Okay, so if the 10 Sephirobolima are the abstract, scaffolding, the dimensions, the principles, then the other part of the equation, the 22 foundation letters, Otiot Yesod, they must be the actual stuff, the active components.
Exactly. They're not just passive symbols for sounds like we think of letters today. In this cosmology, the 22 Hebrew letters are actual creative agents. They are the fundamental particles, the cosmic DNA, as you put it, that God used to literally form and articulate everything that exists.
So God spoke and the world came into being. But this is saying the letters themselves are the substance of that speech, the building blocks.
Precisely. And the genius here is how the Sefer Yetzirah organizes them. It doesn't just list the alphabet. It divides the 22 letters into 3 distinct groups based on their phonetic qualities, how they're pronounced. And then, crucially, it maps these 3 groups onto the 3 fundamental levels of reality.
3 levels. Sure.
The world, Olam, which is the macrocosm, the universe itself. The year, Shana, which represents the dimension of time, cycles, seasons. And the soul or person, Nefesh, which is the microcosm, the individual human being.
Olam, Shana, Nefesh, world, year, soul. So the same letter group structure all 3.
Yes. It establishes this perfect correspondence. It's the classic hermetic principle, as above, so below, baked right into the structure of the alphabet and reality.
Okay, this is fascinating. Let's break down those 3 groups. What's the first one?
The first group contains just 3 letters. They're called the 3 mothers, Imo, Aleph, Mem, and Shin.
Aleph, Mem, Shin. Why mothers?
Because they are considered the originators, the source from which other things derive. They correspond to the 3 primordial elements or states that underpin creation: air, water, and fire.
So Aleph is air, Mem is water, Shin is fire. How does that connection work? Is it arbitrary?
The text suggests it's based on the sounds themselves. Think about it. Shin, that shh sound, it's like the hiss of fire, friction, heat. So Shin corresponds to fire, ash.
Okay, I can hear that.
It's a closed, humming sound. It evokes water, maim, deep, contained, fluid.
Right. And Aleph.
Aleph is the silent letter, the vowel carrier. It's pure breath, the potential for sound. It corresponds to air, avir, the mediating principle, the atmosphere that holds the opposites of fire and water in balance. Aleph is placed between them.
So the very phonetics of these 3 mother letters embody the fundamental physics of the cosmos.
That's the idea. They set the stage. Then you have the second group.
Which is?
The 7 doubles, Kafilet. These are the 7 letters in Hebrew that historically had 2 different pronunciations, a hard plosive sound like B and a soft fricative sound like V. Think vet, kaf chaf, pefe, and so on.
Okay, so they have a built-in duality in their sign.
Exactly. And that linguistic duality gives them dominion over the fundamental dualities, the big pairs of opposites that structure reality and human experience.
What kind of opposites are we talking about?
The text lists 7 pairs of contraries: life and death, peace and war, wisdom and folly, wealth and poverty, seed or fruitfulness and desolation, grace or beauty and ugliness, dominion and servitude.
Wow, those are pretty fundamental tensions, the core conflicts of existence.
They really are. These 7 letters, with their hard, soft sounds, govern these 7 axes upon which reality turns. And, mapping this onto the macrocosm, Olam.
Let me guess. The planets.
Yeah.
7 doubles, 7 classical planets.
You got it. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and by extension, the 7 days of the week. So they structure cyclical time and astrological influence.
And microcosmically. In the Nefesh, the person.
They correspond to the 7 openings or gates in the human head. The 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and the 1 mouth. Again, the duality of the letter often reflects the duality of the organ, and these gates are how we interact with those fundamental contraries like wisdom, folly, peace, war through perception and expression.
Incredible symmetry. Okay, so that's 3 mothers plus 7, doubles equals 10 letters. What about the rest?
The remaining 12 letters form the third group, the 12 simples, Peshut. They're called simple because they only have one pronunciation each. No duality.
12 simples. Zodiac.
Bingo. Cosmically, Olam, they govern the 12 constellations of the zodiac, and temporally, Shana, they govern the 12 months of the year, the annual cycle.
Makes sense. And in the human microcosm, the Nefesh, what do the 12 simple letters correspond to?
This is where it gets very specific about our internal workings. The 12 simples are said to govern 12 primary human faculties, activities, or sometimes internal organs, often called the 12 limbs or directors.
Like what, specifically?
The lists vary slightly in different versions and commentaries, but they typically include things like sight, hearing, smell, speech, taste, coition, sexuality, action, work, movement, walking, anger, mirth, laughter, thought, imagination, meditation, and sleep.
That's a really detailed map of human functions.
It is, and some traditions link these directly to specific organs. The liver, anger, the spleen, mirth, the kidneys, thought, the stomach, action, digestion, and so on. The parts of the body associated with basic life processes, emotions, and activities.
So putting it all together, 3 mothers plus 7, doubles plus 12 simples equals 22 letters. And this system claims that these letters, organized this way, are literally the operating system for the universe, for time, and for the human being.
That's the astonishing claim. The same 22 components, the same structural logic, applies across all scales, which leads to a massive implication.
Bitches.
If you, as a human adept, can understand and master the functions and permutations of these 22 letters which exist within your own soul, your nefesh, then you are essentially learning the master controls for the entire cosmos. Because the microcosm nefesh is built from the exact same blueprint, the same DNA as the macrocosm olam.
Okay, so we have the 10 sephiro providing the abstract structure, the dimensions, and we have the 22 letters as the active components, the cosmic DNA. Now, how does the Sefer Yetzirah describe the actual act of creation, the formation itself? Because you said God isn't depicted like a king just issuing commands, let there be light.
No, the imagery is completely different. It's much more hands-on. God is portrayed as a kind of divine artisan, or maybe a cosmic scientist or master linguist, a combinator.
An artisan. What kind of actions does this artisan perform?
The verbs the text uses are really specific and revealing. God probes or explores. He weighs, he combines, he permutes. The key term here is suruf, and he transposes.
Probes, weighs, combines, permutes, transposes. That sounds like lab work or complex engineering.
It does. Creation isn't presented as a simple act of will, but as a complex, deliberate linguistic and mathematical exercise. God is manipulating these 22 letters according to specific rules.
So the idea is that everything that exists, a star, a rock, a person, an idea, is just a specific combination, a unique permutation of those 22 fundamental letters.
Exactly. They are weighed and combined in precise ways to form everything. The text even gives a specific example of the scale of this combinatorial process. It talks about the 231 gates.
231 gates, or doors. What are those?
These represent the fundamental pairings of the 22 letters, taking any 2 letters from the 22, like Aleph with Bet, Aleph with Gimel, Bet with Gimel, and so on, all the possible unique pairs. These 2-letter combinations are seen as the foundational gates through which all more complex existence emerges.
Okay, wait, let's pause on the math. How do you get 231 from 22 letters?
Right, so if you just pair them up simply, like AB, AC, AD, all the way to the end, considering AB different from BA, you'd have 22 choices for the first letter and 21 for the second. So 21 equals 462 directed pair.
Okay, 462, but the text says 231.
Exactly. 231 is what you get if you consider the pairs non-directed, meaning the connection between Aleph and Bet, AB, is the same single gate as the connection between Bet and Aleph, BA. You're counting the unique relational pathways between the letters. Mathematically, that's NN, hell 1, 2. So 22, 21, 2 equals 231.
Ah, okay. So the 231 gates are the unique connections, the fundamental links between every possible pair of letters in the alphabet. It's a powerful image, like a cosmic network graph or a circuit board with 231 specific pathways.
It's meant to be staggering. Think about it. If all words, all beings, all phenomena are ultimately constructed from these 231 fundamental linkages, these basic 2-letter roots, the text is defining a physics based entirely on language and combination.
This really marks that theological pivot we talked about. It's moving away from creation by divine speech as just fiat, and towards creatio ex lingua creation, literally from language, and creatio ex numero creation from number.
Yes. The 32 paths aren't just descriptions, they are the primordial raw materials. And the universe itself is the incredibly complex text that results from God's masterful permutation of these materials.
And this is where the implications for humans get really wild, right? This lays the groundwork for what becomes practical Kabbalah, Kabbalah Mazid.
It's the logical, if mind-bending, consequence.
How does that leap happen?
Well, think it through. If the entire cosmos is just a vast, intricate permutation of 22 letters, and if human beings in their own soul, their nefesh, contain those very same 22 letters in the faculties they govern, then a human adept who truly understands the rules of combination, the principles of Saruf permutation, who masters this cosmic grammar, theoretically, shouldn't they be able to participate in the creative process, to write new sentences into reality?
Whoa. So learning the grammar lets you become a co-creator.
That's the staggering implication. If you know how the machine works, maybe you can operate the machine.
And that implication leads us directly, almost inevitably, to maybe the most famous and certainly the most literal application of the Sefer Yetzirah's ideas, the legend of the golem.
The golem is the ultimate thought experiment made real, or at least made into legend. It represents the human attempt to directly replicate God's own primary creative act described in Genesis, forming Adam, the first human, from Adama, the dust or clay of the earth.
And the method for creating the golem in these legends, it uses the techniques described in the Sefer Yetzirah.
Explicitly. The legends, especially the ones that cluster around medieval figures associated with the German pietists, like Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague or earlier figures like Eliar of Worms, they detail the process as a direct application of Sefer Yetzirah's principles.
So how does it supposedly work? What's the ritual?
It's described as incredibly meticulous and spiritually demanding. The adept, maybe with some disciples, would first form a human-like figure out of virgin soil or clay, but the real work, the animation, comes next.
The Saruf part.
Exactly. It involves performing complex Saruf permutations. Often this meant walking or circling around the clay figure while chanting specific combinations of letters, particularly the 231 gates, or powerful divine names derived from letter permutations. Intense meditation was key.
And this chanting and permutation eventually brings it to life.
That's the idea. Life is finally imparted, according to most legends, by inscribing a sacred word or divine name onto the golem, typically on its forehead, or sometime on a parchment placed in its mouth. The most famous word used is emet.
Emet, which means
truth. Inscribing truth animates the clay.
So in theory, this is the peak achievement. Humans mastering cosmic grammar, replicating creation.
Yeah.
But the golem stories are always cautionary tales, aren't they? It never quite works out perfectly.
Never. The golem is always fundamentally flawed. It's a demonstration of human power, yes, but also a stark reminder of human limits.
What's the key flaw? What does it lack?
It has life force, vitality. In Kabbalistic terms, it possesses nefesh, the basic animal soul, which gives it animation and often immense physical strength. But it lacks the higher levels of the soul. Critically, it lacks ruach, spirit, breath, and significantly speech.
The golem is always mute.
Always mute. It cannot articulate the very language, the letter combinations that brought it into existence. Why? Because ruach, spirit, corresponds to the very first sephira, the spirit of the living God. That divine spark, that capacity for true consciousness and speech, belongs ultimately to God alone and cannot be fully replicated by human ritual, no matter how skillful.
I see. So the golem demonstrates that humans can maybe achieve mastery over Yetzirah, the level of formation, combining existing elements?
Yes, manipulating the letters and elements.
But they can't reach the higher levels, like Baraya, creation ex nihilo, or Atzilut, pure emanation. They can't create true spirit.
Precisely. The golem is the ultimate proof of the boundary, and the cautionary tale usually ends when the golem runs amok, becomes dangerous, or simply needs to be deactivated. How do they do that?
How?
By erasing the first letter, the aleph, from the word emet on its forehead.
Aleph. The first letter, the mother letter corresponding to air, breath.
Erase the aleph, and what's left? Met.
Which means?
Dead. The human artisan gives life through linguistic truth, but must ultimately return it to death by removing the spark of primordial breath. It signifies that while humans can manipulate the forms of creation, the ultimate source of life and spirit remains beyond their grasp. The deepest truths are perhaps inherently uncreatable by humans.
Okay, so this text, It's incredibly potent. It offers this detailed cosmology, these powerful techniques like Saruf, and inspires these Jabbatic legends like the Golem. But because it's so cryptic, so ambiguous, you mentioned it became a kind of Rorschach test.
Absolutely. People saw it in it what they wanted to see, or perhaps what their existing worldview allowed them to see. Its very obscurity made it incredibly adaptable, and this led to this huge split in how it was interpreted. Basically, two competing camps who both claimed the Sefer Yetzirah as their foundational text.
So the history of the text after its creation is really the history of people fighting over its meaning.
In large part, yes. The history of its commentaries is almost as important as the text itself.
Okay, so who were the main players in this interpretive battle? Let's start with one side. The rationalists.
Right. These were thinkers, primarily in the medieval period, deeply committed to reconciling Jewish tradition with the dominant philosophical systems of the day, mainly Aristotelianism and its Islamic interpretations, like Kalam philosophy. And the heavyweight champion here is definitely Saadia Garin back in the 10th century.
We mentioned him curating the Saadian recension. How did he actually interpret the text's content? What did he do with the Sephirot and the letters?
His whole approach was systematic rationalization. He wanted to strip the text bare of any perceived magical or overly mystical elements. For Saadia, the 10 Sephirot were absolutely not divine emanations or stages within God.
So what were they, in his view?
He argued they were essentially abstract philosophical categories, things like number itself, the primary elements, air, water, fire, the dimensions of space, basically the fundamental constituents of the physical world and the categories needed for human thought to understand that world. Very Aristotelian in flavor.
Okay, so he reinterprets the emanation sequence. Spirit, air, water, fire. Dimensions not as God unfolding, but as a description of the necessary components of the created world.
Exactly. It becomes a treatise on physics and epistemology, not theology or theosophy. And the whole business of Saruf, the letter permutation.
What did he make of that? He couldn't have thought people were actually creating things by chanting letters?
No. For Samaria, that was purely metaphorical. It was a sophisticated way of talking about the physics of speech production, how breath combines with articulation points to form sounds. Or it was about the inherent structure and elegance of the Hebrew language as a divine tool. It was linguistics and physics, not magic. He was determined to make the Sefer Yetzirah look like a respectable philosophical work.
Okay, so that's the rationalist pole. What about the other side? The mystics.
They went in the complete opposite direction, starting around the 12th century in Provence, France, with figures like Isaac the Blind, often called the father of Kabbalah.
Isaac the Blind?
He and his circle utterly rejected Saadia's rationalist interpretation. For them, that approach missed the entire point.
So for the mystics, the Sephirot were...
They were absolutely not just abstract concepts. They were living, breathing, dynamic emanations of God's own essence, the 10 stages of God's unfolding into reality. They were the inner life of the divine, a dynamic structure you could interact with.
And Seraph, the letter permutations, not just a metaphor for speech.
Definitely not. For the mystics, Saruf was a powerful, active, meditative, and ecstatic technique. It was something you did. You would combine letters, meditate on divine names, chant them, all with the goal of altering consciousness, ascending spiritually, and achieving
Kaveket.
cleaving, a state of intimate union or communion with God. Letter permutation was a practical path to mystical experience.
And this mystical interpretation got even more intense later, didn't it, with the German pietists?
Oh, yeah. Figures like Eleazar of Worms, part of the Chassidei Ashkenaz movement in 13th century Germany, they took this practical ecstatic interpretation to its absolute peak. They developed incredibly complex systems of gematria, assigning numerical values to letters and words to find hidden meanings. They focused intensely on manipulating divine names through permutation to induce visions, gain spiritual power, and yes, attempt the literal creation of a golem. That's where those legends really flourish.
It's just incredible. The same short, incredibly dense text becomes the cornerstone for two completely opposing traditions. One sees it as rational physics and linguistics, the other as a handbook for ecstatic union and magical practice.
It perfectly illustrates its power as a Rorschach test. Its ambiguity was its strength, allowing it to anchor both the philosophical and the mystical poles of Jewish thought for centuries. #9, the enduring modern structure.
So the Sefer Yetzirah provided this fundamental architecture, the 10 plus 22 system. And even though later systems, especially the Zohar, dramatically reinterpreted the meaning of those components, the basic structure proved incredibly durable.
Immensely durable. Its influence extends way beyond medieval Judaism. Think about the Sefer HaZohar itself, the monumental work of Kabbalah from 13th century Spain. It completely transforms the Sifro, as we discussed.
Right, it gives them names, personalities, turns them into the tree of life we know today.
But it couldn't have done that without the initial framework provided by the Sefer Yetzirah. The Zohar essentially took the bare skeleton, the idea of 10 emanations, and fleshed it out with narrative, mythology, and psychological depth. It particularly took those 6 abstract spatial dimensions from the Sefer Yetzirah, up, down, east, west, etc., and replaced them with a dynamic named Sifro, like Hesed, love, Gevurah, severity, Tufret, beauty, the ones that form the torso of the divine structure.
So the Zohar overwrote the meaning but kept the structure. It built upon that foundation.
It absolutely needed that 10-point scaffolding to hang its elaborate system on, but the influence doesn't stop there. The structure travels.
Where else does it pop up?
It jumps into Christian Kabbalah during the Renaissance. Thinkers like Pico della Mirandola in Italy in the late 15th century. They got fascinated by Jewish mysticism, believing Kabbalah contained ancient universal truths, a prisca theologia.
And they saw the Sefer Yetzirah's structure as part of that ancient truth.
Yes. They loved the linguistic and numerical focus. They adopted the architecture, but of course reinterpreted it through a Christian lens. They might see the 3 mother letters Aleph, Mem, Shin, air, water, fire, as symbols of the Holy Trinity. They blended the 32 paths with Neoplatonism to create maps of divine process that, they believed, proved Christian doctrines. The structure was portable.
Fascinating. But maybe the most widespread, even if often unrecognized, modern influence comes later, from the occult revival.
Without a doubt. Specifically through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in the late 19th century.
The Golden Dawn, the magical society in Britain that influenced figures like W.B. Yeats and Aleister Crowley.
That's the one. Their whole project was syncretism, trying to weave together all the different mystical and esoteric traditions they could find. Egyptian magic, Rosicrucianism, astrology, Hermetic philosophy, tarot, into one grand, coherent system.
That sounds ambitious. How do you organize all that stuff?
They needed a filing system, a powerful underlying structure to map everything onto. And what did they choose?
Let me guess. The 32 paths of the Sefer Yetzirah.
Exactly. The 10 Sephirah plus 22 letters became their grand, unified framework.
How did they use it specifically?
They created a set of direct, explicit correspondences that are still incredibly influential today. They took the 22 foundation letters of the Hebrew alphabet and mapped each one directly onto one of the 22 major arcana cards of the tarot deck.
Wow. So the fool is Aleph, the magician is Bet, and so on.
Precisely. Then they took the 10 Sephirah using the later Zoharic version with names like Keter, Hokmah, etc., and mapped those onto the 10 numbered cards, ace through 10, in each of the 4 tarot suits. They also linked the Sephirah to planets, stages of spiritual development, and so on.
That's actually profound. It means that anyone, anywhere in the world today, who picks up a standard tarot deck and starts learning about the major arcana and the numbered cards.
Yes.
Even if they've never heard of Kabbalah or the Sefer Yetzirah, they are interacting with, learning, and using a 32-part symbolic filing system whose architecture derives directly from that tiny, cryptic Jewish mystical text from late antiquity.
That's exactly right. The structure itself, 10 plus 22, proved to be its most enduring legacy. It became the blueprint, the organizational spine for much of modern Western esotericism, especially tarot. The architecture outlived the original specific interpretations in many ways. Hashtag tag outro. So when we look back at the Sefer Yetzirah, its incredible staying power isn't really because it gives clear, easy answers. It absolutely doesn't.
No, definitely not.
It endures, I think, precisely because of that profound functional ambiguity. It refuses to be just a book you read passively. It demands engagement. It functions like a device, a philosophical engine, a truly performative text.
And we've tried to map that performance today. We traced how the text describes God himself probing, weighing, and permuting the letters to create the universe. And the amazing thing is, because the text itself is so dense and cryptic, it forces you, the reader, to do the exact same thing. You have to probe it, weigh the meanings, permute the possibilities, just to make sense of it. You have to replicate the process on the text itself.
That's the transformative goal, I believe. The text describes the art of formation, Yetzirah. And in the process of trying to understand that description, the reader's own mind is nudged, maybe even compelled, into that same kind of combinatorial architectural thinking. The book aims to form, Yetzirah, the consciousness of the reader, shaping it in the image of that cosmic artisan it describes.
So we've worked through this complex doctrine, hopefully making it processable for you. We detailed the raw components, those abstract 10 Sephirot Belima, and the 22 active foundation letters. We followed the text's journey from late antiquity through that great rationalist versus mystic debate, saw its literal application in the Golem legends, and traced its structural echo right down into modern occultism and tarot.
It's quite a journey for such a small book, and it leaves us perhaps with this final provocative thought to mull over, something for you, the listener, to consider. If the Sefer Yetzirah is right, if the universe really is built on a finite set of linguistic and numerical components, a cosmic grammar, does mastering that grammar, as the text seems to imply, actually grant humanity a kind of divine creative power?
The possibility of becoming co-creators.
Or is the cautionary tale of the Golem the final word? Is it proof that the most essential truths, the divine spark of Ruach, the animating spirit symbolized by that first letter Aleph, will always remain fundamentally beyond our grasp, permanently guarded, just out of reach, no matter how cleverly we learn to permute the letters?